The rise of the immortal king. In an age when empires rose and fell like the tides, there was one name that struck fear into all who heard it. Arcanus the Eternal, ruler of the kingdom of the dead. Once a noble king of the prosperous land of Luminaris, Arcanus had sought a way to save his people from a plague that ravaged the continent. Desperate, he turned to forbidden magic, seeking out the Chalice of Eternity, a relic whispered of in the darkest corners of myth. The Chalice granted him what he wished for, the power to overcome death itself. But its magic came at a terrible cost. His body became unaging, but his soul was consumed by darkness. Worse still, his kingdom fell into ruin, its people transformed into the undead. Unable to accept the horror he had unleashed, Arcanus turned his newfound power outward. Over centuries, he became a conqueror. Armies of skeletal warriors, spectral knights, and monstrous abominations swept across the lands, leaving nothing but devastation in their wake. The once noble king became a tyrant, his heart blackened by centuries of power and isolation. Neighboring kingdoms built walls, forged alliances, and prayed to their gods, but none dared confront him directly. 3 ordinary souls. In the small, unremarkable village of Filtherus, life carried on quietly, despite the looming threat of Arcanus' undead legions. The village lay on the edge of the cursed lands, a barren wasteland that was a grim reminder of the king's dominion. Here lived Gedrick, a young sorcerer whose love for books and daydreams made him the subject of ridicule among the more practical villagers. While others worked in the fields, Gedrick pored over ancient tomes and scrolls, fascinated by tales of heroes and forgotten magics. Chalice, a wandering knight, had come to Filtherus some months ago, drawn by a mysterious urge he couldn't explain. He carried a sword unlike any other. Its blade shimmered with a cold, blue fire, and strange runes adorned its hilt. The villagers regarded him with a mix of awe and suspicion, but Chalice kept his past a closely guarded secret. Alina, a skilled huntress, was the pride of the village. Her bow never missed its mark, and her quiver held a single, enchanted arrow gifted to her by a dying elven traveler. This arrow, she had been told, could pierce any barrier, no matter how strong or magical. When word reached Filtherus that the undead armies were moving toward their lands, the villagers prepared to flee. But Gedrick, Chalice, and Alina made a pact. They would not stand by as their home was destroyed. If no one else would face Arcanus, they would. Together, they set out on a perilous journey into the heart of darkness. The Whispering Swamp. The first challenge on their journey was the Whispering Swamp, a cursed marshland that no traveler had ever crossed and lived to tell the tale. The air was thick with mist, and faint whispers filled the air, promising knowledge, power, or salvation to those who listened. Gedrick warned his companions not to heed the voices, for they were the spirits of the damned, luring mortals to their doom. As they ventured deeper, shadowy figures began to emerge from the fog. These were wraiths, spectral guardians bound to the swamp. Ordinary weapons were useless against them, but Chalice's sword burned with a fierce light, cutting through their ethereal forms. Gedrick cast protective spells to shield Alina, who used her keen aim to distract the wraiths and create openings for Chalice to strike. After hours of fighting and evading traps, they emerged from the swamp, exhausted but alive. The voices faded, but the memory of their haunting promises lingered. Secrets of the Chalice. In the ruined city of Eldralith, once a center of learning, the group found an ancient library. Among the crumbling shelves, Gedrick discovered a text that detailed the origin of the Chalice of Eternity. Created by a god of chaos, the Chalice was a vessel of pure magic, capable of granting eternal life, but only by consuming the soul of its bearer. The book also revealed a critical weakness. The Chalice could be destroyed, but only by a weapon infused with divine energy. The heroes realized that Chalice's sword and Alina's enchanted arrow might be their only hope. But the book also warned of 3 warlords of shadow, generals who had sold their souls to serve Arcanus. Each guarded a piece of the magical seal that protected the Chalice. The first warlord. Their first encounter with the warlords came in the desolate plains of Calboris, where they faced Sereth the Reaper, a towering figure clad in black armor. Seretha's blade could drain the life from anything it touched, and his undead minions swarmed the battlefield. Chalice engaged Sereth directly, his sword clashing against the Reaper's cursed blade. Alina, from a distance, aimed for weak points in Seretha's armor, while Gedrick conjured fiery illusions to confuse and disorient the enemy forces. Finally, Alina's enchanted arrow found its mark, piercing Seretha's helm and shattering his undead form. With his death, the first seal was broken. The Forge of Souls, the second warlord, Morvain the Blighted, awaited them in the volcanic Forge of Souls, where weapons of dark magic were created for Arcanus' army. The heat was unbearable, and the air shimmered with the glow of molten metal. Morvain, a grotesque figure with molten skin and fiery eyes, wielded a hammer that could summon waves of fire. Chalice discovered that his sword absorbed the heat of the forge, growing stronger with each strike. Gedrick used a spell to cool the air around them, shielding them from the worst of the flames, while Alina targeted Morvain's exposed joints. After a grueling battle, Chalice struck the killing blow, and the forge erupted in a torrent of light as the second seal broke. The Labyrinth of Shadows. The third warlord, Caliph the Unseen, commanded the Labyrinth of Shadows beneath Arcanus Castle. This maze of twisting corridors and shifting walls was filled with illusions and traps. Caliph herself was a master of deception, able to vanish into darkness and strike from nowhere. Gedrick used his knowledge of light magic to create beacons that illuminated the labyrinth, forcing Caliph into view. Alina's reflexes and precision kept her one step ahead of the traps, while Chalice used his sword to carve through walls and open new paths. In the end, Caliph was undone by her own arrogance. Gedrick reflected her magic back at her using a mirror spell, shattering her form and breaking the final seal. The throne of the Immortal King. At last, the trio entered the throne room of the Immortal King. Arcanus sat upon a throne of bone and obsidian, his skeletal visage framed by the pulsing glow of the Chalice of Eternity. The room was vast, its walls etched with runes of binding and protection. Arcanus rose, his voice echoing like thunder. "You come to defy death itself? Foolish mortals." The battle was unlike anything they had faced. Arcanus wielded the full power of the Chalice, summoning storms of black lightning and waves of spectral soldiers. Gedrick, nearly drained of strength, used his last reserves of magic to shield his companions. Chalice fought Arcanus directly, their blades clashing in bursts of light and shadow. Alina, waiting for the perfect moment, loosed her enchanted arrow. It struck the Chalice, cracking its surface but not breaking it. The shattering of eternity. As Arcanus prepared to unleash a killing blow, Gedrick channeled his life force into Chalice's sword, imbuing it with divine energy. Chalice, with a final, mighty swing, shattered the Chalice. A wave of blinding light filled the room, and the Immortal King screamed as his immortality was ripped away. Now mortal, Arcanus fell to his knees. Chalice drove his blade through the tyrant's heart, ending his reign of terror. Collapse of the kingdom. The destruction of the Chalice unleashed a chain reaction. The castle began to crumble, and the undead legions disintegrated into ash. The trio barely escaped as the kingdom of the dead collapsed into the void. A new dawn. Returning to Filtherus, the heroes were met with celebrations and gratitude. Gedrick, though weakened, became a renowned scholar and mage. Chalice, his mysterious past forgotten, was hailed as a legendary knight. Alina, whose arrow had turned the tide, was immortalized in song and story. Their journey became the stuff of legend, a reminder that even the darkest shadows can be defeated by courage, friendship, and hope. And though the Chalice of Eternity was gone, its lesson remained. True immortality lies not in endless life, but in the legacy we leave behind.